Welcome to MetalVice in 666. I'm one of your hosts, Brian, joined with the other host,
Karen.
If you haven't joined us before, it's been a while since we've explained what a 666 is, so I'll just do that real quick. We, on our normal podcast that we have, and this one, all the time really, we just ramble, as you can already tell probably. We just ramble and ramble. So the thought behind this was we'll just spend 6 minutes and 66 seconds, or 7 minutes and 6 seconds, depending on how you do your counting, talking about a topic, just any random ass topic. So that's where the premise for this started. We always go over, or sometimes we struggle a little bit, but not often.
Yeah, and hardly ever we struggle too much. Normally it's like, oh, we're at time and we're only halfway through our thoughts.
Right, yeah. So we're going to start the timer here and see how this goes, but this one is going to be about merch cuts.
Again.
Venues doing merch cuts. We've already done one of these. Going to do it as sort of a follow-up based on some additional information that we've sort of found and experienced and whatnot. So let's just go ahead and start the timer. Okay, so when we did this the first time, I think I walked away saying, merch cuts suck. I don't like them, but I kind of understand them. I don't think whatever they're charging, we didn't have any idea what they were charging, but whatever they're charging was too much. But I did think it made sense to charge something because they are basically, the band is renting space from the venue. So I thought it should be okay to cover some of that expense from the venue. Maybe a couple $100 at most, I thought.
Yeah. We did it off of, what's his name? Ronnie.
There were a few articles at the time, but he was one that talking about it.
Called it out because the venue, whatever venue he was playing at that time, was taking 25%. So he's like, so we decided not to bring merch in.
And there were a few other bands doing the same thing. They're like, we're not even allowed to bring our own staff in. You outsource the staffing, and you don't let us bring our staff in, and you're taking a cut on top of that and making us pay for this staff that you brought in. So they're like, fuck it, we just won't sell merch. Yeah,
exactly. And so that was basically the premise of our first episode, is going off of that article, the articles that we were reading at the time, and then our own thoughts on that. And now we've talked to some venues and talked to some people, so we kind of have a little bit more information. Yeah,
and so how this sort of came in my mind of wanting to do this again, and what spurred you on to reach out to some people as well, is I went to a couple of shows when you were in Ireland. One was Static X, and I just happened to ask the people at the table, because that was sort of my New Year's resolution, or we did a whole 666, I think, on that too, of like, what do we want our goals for 2024. And one of mine was just talk to more people at the merch booths, as well as just other fans at the crowd, because we're really bad at talking to other people.
We don't talk to people.
But I just asked the lady at the Lines of Loyalty table, and I was like, is the venue taking any merch cuts? And this was at the Radius down here in Chicago. And she's like, nope, tonight they are not. And it's like, oh, that's awesome. Vague if that meant they do at this venue sometimes, but I think it was more of tonight for our performance, they're not, in the past nights they have.
Yeah, and I could see that because sometimes there's sponsored shows there, so I'm wondering if that's
maybe,
So we'll get into that in a little bit.
But then a couple nights later, or a few weeks later, whenever it was later, I went to this show, Ministry show.
Oh, yeah.
One of the first things I did when I walked in was buy this t-shirt, because I liked the t-shirt a lot. I wanted to buy it. I like Ministry. Really fun, really interesting show. We'll talk about that, I think, during like some other time in the future. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But got the shirt, got a beer, went up, listened to the first band, went down, got a second beer. Nobody was at the merch table. So I was like, oh, let's just go up real quick and ask them, because it felt weird that the people looked like staff of the venue. And I was like, I bet they're taking merch cuts. I think it's a Live Nation venue. They're probably taking merch cuts. So I went and asked. And I asked the people at the desk, or the table, and they're like, yep, we're taking merch cuts. And right then I was like, okay, thank you, walked away. And then I told myself, I guess I'm done buying beer tonight, because I don't support merch cuts. I don't want the venues doing that. And my thought process was, I would have bought another 2 or 3 beers on top of the 2 I had already purchased. You're making more money on the beers than you are on the $4 you're probably making on a shirt, or $8, whatever it is. So this is stupid. But then I kind of struggled with but I want to buy band shirts. So how do I get around not supporting merch cuts, but yet buying band merch and shit?
Yeah, it's not just band shirts. We like the tour shirt.
Yeah, the tour shirt, yeah.
I mean, because you could buy the band shirts online. Sometimes you could buy tour shirts online, but sometimes not. So
it's kind of hit and miss. Yeah. So that's kind of like, well, all right, when I go to see a show, I kind of have to buy it at the venue if I want to guarantee I'm going to get it. But I also don't want to support merch cuts. So what's the trade-off going to be? And I think for me, it's going to be, okay, if they're taking merch cuts, I'll ask right away. I'll just won't buy beer. I'll buy a significantly less amount of liquids at the show, was sort of my thought process there.
Yeah.
But then you reached out to somebody you met at another show and talked to
Yeah.
him because he works at a venue.
Yeah, he works at a venue, and like I think he like manages the venue, so he has a lot of insight. It's not just working there. So, and he mentioned at his particular venue, he does have Live Nation shows, or it's Live Nation sponsored for some shows, and then other shows are independent, so they don't have Live Nation. So with the
Yeah, they book themselves.
they book themselves. Yes, yeah. Sorry, that's what I meant. So when it's Live Nation, well, either way, it's 80-20. So they do take a merch cut at the particular venue he works at.
Yep.
And it's 80-20. So the band gets 80%, they get 20%. And then when Live Nation is sponsoring the show or books the show or however, whatever that, you know what I'm trying to say. But when it's Live Nation show, then it's still 80-20, but the venue only gets 10% and Live Nation takes 10%.
Right. They split it
Yes.
10 down the middle.
Yeah.
And he also said that that's where it starts. It can go up from there if they're supporting staff members to help support or
Yes.
staff up the booth to
Yeah.
sell merch and
Yeah.
shit.
Which I can kind of see because you have like the venue has to pay for a staff member to be there. But for like the example that you had where so I can't remember what band it was, but like they just didn't bring their merch in because they had staff to work the booth.
Right.
And they were like, no, you can't.
You
Like,
can't use
you
your
can't
staff.
use
We
that.
have staff for you.
Yeah, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
But if it's like the venue's offering to have a staff member there, but then your merch cut is now 15% to cover their salary, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, and I think I said during that first episode we did, like, to me, it kind of makes sense because this is real estate essentially, right? In a venue that you're saying, okay, band, you can come in, you can use this, you can use the tables, you can use the equipment, but that's equipment that we own unless you bring your own tables. But that's still our space. That could be a bar.
Yeah.
That could be whatever we want it to be. You need to now cover some of that expense to rent this space out. That makes sense to me. But I think the rent should only be $100, $200 at most.
Yeah, not
10%.
10% of the
Or you
cost.
do 10%, 20% up to this threshold. And then after that, you get everything.
Yeah.
You know, that's
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. Well, during that first episode, there was in those articles they were also like calling for venues to give beer cuts.
One band was
So-
like, sure, give us beer cuts then.
Yeah, which kind of makes sense because that's what venue, like that's bands bring in people that drink, basically.
Right, I'm not going to House of Blues to drink beer at night. I'm going to House of Blues to see a show
And
I'll
have a
happen to-
beer.
yeah.
Yeah.
And 20% of what, $40 is like $8.
Yeah.
And you're making a higher profit margin on that beer because that's no way the beer costs $10 and you're charging $15, $16 for a beer.
Yeah. So I did ask this guy about that as well because I was just curious, like how it worked or whatever. And the band doesn't get any of it
For the
alcohol
concessions.
Yeah, for the concessions. But when they have a Live Nation sponsor, it's 50-50.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Live Nation takes 50% of their profit.
Oh, we're at 50%.
Or
we're at time. But
yeah.
Live Nation takes 50% of the
Yes,
concessions.
I was so surprised with that.
So are we? I'll have to go back and read this conversation because I'm not sure. Is it actually a Live Nation venue, or is it just sort of licensed, or what?
I'll have to see that as well. Like, I don't know if the Live Nation, because
that seems outrageous that Live Nation is getting 50%.
yeah, we went into a lot of
concessions.
conversation. It wasn't just about merch cut and beer cuts and stuff, and there was a lot of conversation about him having to work with Live Nation to get shows booked and like all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how that all works.
Interesting.
Yeah. And that's why I'm saying sponsored shows, like Live Nation sponsored shows, like Live Nation's bringing the show there. So I'm not sure if it's when like Live Nation does tours, because like we've seen that here, where like they'll go to like 10 Muley Park and then like all those amphitheaters that are around because they're owned by Live Nation.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, if they're doing that and then they happen to go to his venue also because it's sponsored,
That seems
maybe.
weird that they can
Yeah.
demand 50%, but at the same time, you're not getting their acts unless you
Yeah.
agree to do that, and they have all the acts.
They do.
So
That's the monopoly. That's the fucking problem right there.
we're recording this on April 16th, and I think it was Wall Street Journal or Reuters today announced that as early as next month, the DOJ is going to pursue antitrust lawsuits against Live Nation.
Fucking do it.
So
Can we like sign a petition or something? Because I would put my name to that.
the one last thing I wanted to bring up or talk about before closing out was we were at a show up in Milwaukee. I think it was the Rave. talking to some people working the merch table there, and just asked if they were taking merch cuts, because I know the rave is independently owned, and we love the rave so much.
Yep.
And I kind of didn't expect them to take merch cuts. So I was expecting the answer to be, no, they don't take merch cuts. But I want to ask. You don't know until you actually ask. And the response was, yes, they are. I was like, oh, shit, really? I was actually kind of taken aback by it. And the guy working the table was like, they are, but I'm actually okay with it. Like, they're taking merch cuts, but they're super fucking nice to us. They have all hands on deck. As soon as we get here, they're helping us out. They're giving us anything we need. Any questions we have, any sort of help we need, they're giving us that. They're super cool about it. And they're like, no, we were at a show a couple nights ago at a different venue, and they checked me in and checked me out. What that means, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, we speculated.
Yeah, I don't know if that's like counting a drawer. Like, how much money did you have?
I'm assuming it's counting drawers or counting merch.
Right, counting physical inventory. Like, we did inventory when we worked at grocery stores.
Yeah.
That's a pain in the ass.
It
Do
is,
a physical inventory when you walk into a venue with, I have 14 large shirts and 200 large hats, or, you know what I'm saying. Hats aren't sized.
I'm assuming that that's what they were doing, just to make sure that there was no under the table stuff, and they got all their 20% or whatever the percentage was that they were supposed to get.
And the guy kept reiterating that the rave is taking a cut. I'm okay with that because of XYZ. They're super cool people. And then he's like, and just for full transparency, they're only taking 10%. This is the least amount of cuts that we have ever taken at any venue, other than no cuts whatsoever. And when you go see a show at the rave, you will see they have a fuck ton of staff all over the place. Security, bartenders. I think the sound people are their people too, or at least sometimes they are. It's a really great facility, really great staff. Everybody's nice. Everybody's great. Just amazing people all around.
I was going to say, like, even with that, him saying, like, that they were experiencing such a good, backstage experience. I was like, every single time we've always had a really great front stage experience.
Like from a fan,
from a fan's perspective, which is why we go a lot, which is why we talk about it a lot.
It's definitely one of my favorite venues because of the aesthetics, the sound, the bands they bring in, and the staff themselves are just so fucking awesome. So, I mean, that is why that is my favorite venue of all time, 100%. I think, right now.
Yeah.
But in any case, merch cuts suck.
We've talked for 20 minutes probably.
Yeah, we rambled. So, in any case, go see live music. Support your bands.
Support the bands. Buy the merch, even if it's online or something.
Yeah.
But that's how they make money going from show to show. So
yeah, merch helps out a lot. So support the band, support live music, and just support music in general. So see you out there.
Bye.